one crime, one horrendous deed that changed the USA and the world. One crime, one unspeakable act that forever changed lives and led to a groundbreaking law, Megan's Law. 30 years later, this law became a powerful legacy, saving countless of lives and actually empowering communities with critical information. Let's begin with Megan. Megan Kanka was born on 7th of December 1986 in Hamilton, New Jersey. She was with her loving family, her parents, Maureen and Richard, and her siblings, a sister and a brother, Megan being the youngest child. Back in the 90s, parents felt safe letting their children play freely in their neighborhoods. It was a time when trust in one's community was unshaken. Megan was a bright and a sweet 7-year-old who loved riding her bike. But one fateful day, she vanished. Megan, an innocent child, was lured by a neighbor with the promise of seeing a puppy. Thank you very much for coming here, and let's dive together in this horrendous story that actually changed lives. Megan was trusting the adult. She entered his house unaware it was a house of horrors. Inside, the unimaginable happened. I will put it up on the screen because I'm not able to say it here, but eventually she was not among us anymore. Her parents noticed she was missing, and their worst nightmare came. In July 1994, she would be forever remembered, unfortunately stuck in time. Her photos, her memories were frozen at the age of 7. Megan was last seen chatting with another neighbor called Jesse Timmendequas, a 33-year-old man who had been cleaning his boat called Sensation outside of his house. He lived across the street from Megan. At 8 p.m., she was reported missing after her mother woke up and saw that her girl was not coming home. She asked the neighbors, they didn't know anything, so her mother went to the police and reported Megan missing. A massive search began as approximately 500 police, 39 companies of firefighters, and a multitude of volunteers searched a 3-square-mile area around Megan's home. Volunteers handed out flyers, others went house to house asking if anyone had seen the child. Jesse Timmendequas stopped by the Kanka home and offered to circulate flyers. Maureen Kanka, Megan's mother, went on television asking for the safe return of her daughter. I quote, please help us find our daughter. We want to bring her out safely. Whoever out there has her, she's a wonderful girl. She's only 7. Let her come back. Initially, Timmendequas gave conflicting statements to police and Megan's family, however, about when he had last seen Megan. He also gave conflicting statements concerning his whereabouts during the time of Megan's disappearance. This was strange, guys. The following day, at the prompting of his roommate, the defendant told police that Megan was dead and led them to her body. In a formal statement, he confessed to the murder and some, but not all aspects of the assault. After police presented him with the results of the autopsy, defendant provided further details of the sexual assault and Megan's other injuries. Hamilton police found the body according to the criminal's indication. It was dumped on the West Windsor side of Mercer County Park. Timmendequas was arrested at 7 p.m. on Saturday, July 30. Police told the Kanka family that Megan's body has been found in the woods. Richard Kanka, Megan's father, walked out on his porch and looked across the street. Someone, he yelled, ought to burn that house to the ground. He was in grief and in pain, and we cannot imagine what he was feeling. The man who took Megan's life was Jesse Timmendequas, a twice convicted sex offender. He had spent years in prison for his previous crimes, yet he lived freely in the house next door. Worse, his 2 roommates were also convicted offenders. That house, guys, just steps away from Megan's home, was a ticking bomb, a danger no one had anticipated. During the penalty phase at the trial, the criminal offered two witnesses who presented evidence of mitigating circumstances in his background. A social worker testified that Timmendequas' mother was a promiscuous alcoholic who had 10 children by 7 different men, and that defendant's father was a violent drinker with a criminal history. Talking about family history in this case. Based on information provided by defendant's mother, the social worker testified that defendant was raised in poverty and was often cold, dirty, hungry, and without adequate medical care. Other sources told that the social worker that defendant's father had actually abused defendant and his brother, that the brother saw their father rape a 7-year-old girl, and that the father tortured and killed their pets. Defendant's second expert, a psychologist, relied on the report of the social worker. He found that defendant suffers from pedophilia, borderline mental retardation, fetal alcohol effect, and schizoid personality disorder. The psychologist expressed the opinion that at the time of the crime, defendant was under extreme emotional disturbance. Megan's death, said the psychologist, was caused by a reflexive response to the panic defendant felt when the victim attempted to flee. And this is where the state comes in and presented a psychiatrist as a rebuttal witness. He actually testified that there was no evidence to support defendant's claims of extreme emotional disturbance and diminished capacity. He said that defendant's IQ 74 showed a borderline intelligence that did not prevent him from functioning or appreciating the nature of his conduct. So actually, he was able to reason between good and bad. Thus, Timmendequas was eventually sentenced to death, but his sentence will be commuted to life once the state abolished the death penalty in 2007. And now let's deep dive into defendant's psychology to understand his reasoning. Jesse K. Timmendequas, born on 1961, had a disturbing history. In 1979, he pleaded guilty to attempting to assault a 5-year-old girl in Piscataway Township, New Jersey. He received a suspended sentence, but was later incarcerated for failing to attend counseling, so he did not pursue what the state intended to. In 1991, he pleaded guilty to assaulting a 7-year-old girl and served 6 years at the Adult Diagnostic and Treatment Center, ADTC, in Avenel, New Jersey. Reports from his time there painted a grim picture. He showed little interest in rehabilitation and was described by one therapist as a whiner who spent most of his time sleeping. So he was actually sleeping on state's money when the state tried to rehabilitate him. Another therapist believed he would reoffend but did not foresee him escalating to murder. Sadly, these warnings were ignored and Timmendequas returned to society without sufficient monitoring. His violent escalation, the assault and murder of Megan, was a chilling reminder of how the system had failed. To comprehend Timmendequas' behavior, experts often point to psychological disorders like antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, and psychopathy. Some of the key traits of ASPD include a disregard for human rights or for the rights and safety of others, lack of empathy, remorse or guilt, impulsivity and the tendency to violate social norms, psychopathy, which overlaps with ASPD with antisocial personality disorder, is characterized by extreme lack of empathy or remorse, manipulative and deceitful behavior, thrill-seeking, including deriving pleasure from doing harm. Timmendequas exhibited these traits in alarming ways. His repeated offenses, lack of remorse, and violent escalation to murder suggests profound antisocial and psychopathic tendencies. Despite multiple incarcerations, he showed no signs of rehabilitation, making him a highly dangerous individual. And this is how the birth of Megan's Law came into fruition. Megan's murder devastated her parents, her family, her community. Maureen and Richard actually channeled their grief into action. For me, they are heroes, whereas the rest of us might be numb from such grief and pain. Megan's parents fought with everyone who opposed this law. It wasn't easy for them. They fought tirelessly for a law that would prevent such tragedy in the future. Their advocacy led to the passage of Megan's Law in New Jersey just 1 month after Megan's death. The law introduced a sex offender registry and required community notification when offenders moved into the neighborhoods. Over time, Megan's Law became a federal mandate and has since been adopted internationally. Without this law, Megan's killer, who had already committed heinous crimes, already he was committed for 2 crimes, guys, might have been identified sooner, and Megan might still be alive today. Of course, there was a debate around her law. Like any significant legislation, Megan's Law has faced criticism. Some argue that it violates offenders' rights, affecting their housing, employment, and reintegration into society. Others cite privacy concerns and questions the law's effectiveness. However, as a parent and a guardian, the perspective shifts. If someone has committed such horrendous acts, assaulting and scarring innocent children for life, shouldn't the community have the right to know? I ask of you. Shouldn't parents be empowered to protect their children from potential harm? Let me know in the comments what do you feel and think. The critics might point to human rights. But where is the humanity in protecting those who destroy lives? Where is it? Megan's mother had no idea the house next door was a haven for predators. Trusting one's neighbor shouldn't mean turning a blind eye to danger. Megan's story reminds us that trust must be earned, not assumed. If Megan's Law had existed earlier, Maureen and Richard would have been armed with the knowledge they needed to protect their daughter. Megan's story reminds us that trust must be earned, and I quite understood what they've meant with this case. Her legacy has inspired global change, including the establishment of Sarah's Law in the United Kingdom following the tragic murder of 8-year-old Sarah Payne in 2000. While not identical to Megan's Law, Sarah's Law allows parents to inquire if someone with access to their child has a record of sexual offenses. So, Megan was killed in 1994, Sarah in 2000, so 6 years later, and Sarah's mother from UK was absolutely convinced that it was a criminal offender with past offenses, and she advocated a lot in UK to pass this law, similar to what Megan's mother Maureen did in US. Actually, Sarah's mother was absolutely convinced even before the criminal of her daughter was apprehended that Sarah's case is similar to Megan's. She had the mother's intuition in which she said this is something that actually is happening, and the guy who did this to my Sarah is similar to the guy who did the horrific crime to Megan, and we need to pass the same type of legislation in UK. I'm really, really surprised of the mother's intuition and how these women, amidst absolutely terrific pain, and I cannot imagine, guys, how is it to feel and to experience such a tragedy in your lifetime, to have the power and strength to go out and fight the world, because they had people against them. They had people against them saying it will affect lives, it will affect offenders' lives in housing, employment, and we will create issues in the community, and we want vigilantes, actions in our community, and so on and so forth. But these women fought, and they didn't stop until the legislation was passed. And this is what I find truly inspiring for today's case. In conclusion, Megan Kanka as well as Sarah paid the ultimate price. But Megan's legacy lives on. Through her parents' relentless efforts, Megan's law has saved countless lives and prevented further atrocities. It is a law born from tragedy, from horrendous deed, but rooted in hope, a powerful tool to safeguard the innocent. Remember Megan's story, remember her legacy, and remember that sometimes it takes one tragedy to spark a change that protects generations to come. Thank you for your time, have a good day or a good night, and take care of yourself.